Hello guys, welcome to the shop again. Well, I just posted a video a little bit ago about the Chinese motor I got. Here she is. It's supposed to be a 125. It says 124 cubic centimeters on the bore there. Yeah, maybe it's got a big bore kit, maybe they're lying to me. One thing I'm going to point out before we go into what we're doing with this, if you see a gigantic casting hole right here that you can look in and basically it looks like you're looking at a push rod, you're not. It's this stud right here, and that's supposed to be there, hard as that is to believe. That looks like crap, but that's apparently how they're made. I about had a spasm, let me tell you, when I rolled this thing over and saw that. Well, anyway, so what we're going to do here is we're going to be putting that in the old golf cart. I mentioned it before, but I didn't think I'd be able to afford it. Turns out I could. So we're going to do that. The transmission there has to go. The engine has to go. The exhaust has to go. So, oh, and the tank and this plate are coming off so that I can get at this better, both for removing this and for installation of the other one, because this, just like this was, is going to be pure fabrication. I don't know how this is going to go until it goes there. So we're going to have to take all this junk out, get a fairly clean slate except for the drive shaft stays. We're going to be driving that with the new motor. New motor's an ATV motor. It's got reverse and 3 speeds forward. I got a bad feeling that because it's got reverse and it should have been a 4-speed, I know that they remove a gear in order for that thing to have reverse, and I got a bad feeling that its first gear they've removed. Thankfully, this is a very low geared rear end, but just a hunch I have that it may not have all the power in the world in low gear. I was kind of hoping it would have, because we want to climb hills with this. This is the deer go-getter, and the deer are usually down the steepest, most ridiculous hill. I mean, it's South Central Missouri. There's hills. It's relatively flat right here where I live, but we go deer hunting. It's about 15 miles, 20 miles away. Yeah, it's rough, but we own that little piece of land, so that's where we're hunting. Anyway, I'm going to need to get you set up in the stand. I'm debating how much of this you really want to see, because, I mean, it's just pulling stuff out. But there will be points at which I will stop and record, like to show you how I put propane on this engine, because that might be of interest to somebody. The transmission, I don't know why no one has mentioned this. It looks like it's backwards. If you look at that clutch, you'll see that this one is on right, but that one appears to be backwards. Believe it or not, it isn't. What's backwards is the transmission supposed to be on the other side, but the bevel on the belt is correct. It's flat on one side, beveled on the other. This is one of those Tab 30s, I think. It's not meant for a lot of horsepower, but it'll handle this little thing. But I had to do that because I couldn't put the transmission on the other side. This is the longest belt I could find. And if I put the transmission on the other side, well, there's a drive shaft there. So I couldn't do that. It worked. It gave the belt too much leverage, though, and it tended to twist the transmission a little. It was working fine. But that always worried me, that that twist was eventually going to throw the alignment on the belt off or something and cause issues. So thankfully, this can go in a go-kart or something later. Not going to have to deal with that. Probably the engine too. Although I don't know that it'll run on propane. Who knows? May sell the engine and transmission. I don't know. But whatever the case, it's got to come out. Plate's got to come off. Tank's got to come out. I'm just putting that stuff in the shed where it'll be safe and dry. So let me get you set up in the stand here. And if I see anything interesting, I will stop and record that. All right, we about got the engine loose, I think. See if we can't get him out of there. It's going to be a tight fit. I think it'll come when we get some junk out the way. I'll just set it right up here on the floorboard when it gets out. If it gets out. Trouble is, there ain't no good place to grab it from this angle. Oh, yeah, there is. I got it. Oh. Okay. Looks like we brought a rubber along. Where is it? Not there. Not there. Must have fell off somewhere. Because there was definitely a rubber. Ah, there he is. Okay, we might be reusing those. Let me see if I can get you a view of the hole here. So, there. That's where it come out of. This was the air cleaner. I'm going to get it out of the way. We still got to get that stupid transmission loose. Thing's been kind of a constant nightmare, that transmission. And we're going to have to put the motor in right here with the head this way. And the sprocket will be to the right of your screen and back. So, that motor plate that I put in here, I don't know if I'm going to have to grind that out of there, if I'm going to have to cut them welds loose. I'm pretty proud of those welds, but may have to take it out. I just don't know yet. I don't know how I'm going to get that transmission out. That's going to be a struggle. So, but anyway, we're halfway there, I guess. Maybe half. That transmission will be a problem. Be back in a minute. Okay, I got the engine out. I got the transmission out. I did have to disconnect that drive shaft because the transmission wouldn't come out. There was a bolt. This thing went together like a puzzle. And you have to take this off first, and then you have to take that off. I mean, it's like trying to take the piston out without removing the head or the crank. It's, I guess there's a way, but I didn't figure it out. So I took it back apart the way I put it together, slow and painful. And now that that's got, we've got to start fabricating a mount for that engine, a way for that engine to be in this hole. And I don't know what that is yet. That motor plate that I've put in here, I don't see a way I'm going to be able to recycle that, but I don't know yet. I'm probably going to have to offset that motor up in the air, but I'm also going to have to drill some big holes, probably right about here, 2 of them. Drain plugs, you got to change the oil, and you got to think about that. You know, you can't just put it in and hope for the best. You've got to actually rig it where you can, maintain it. You can't remove the engine every time it needs an oil change. And there's a screen somewhere you got to clean, and yeah. So I'm going to have to fabricate some way of getting this motor in where I can still work on it. So that probably means lifting it up, which means I may build on top of that mount. It may just save me a little bit of metal. But whatever the case, probably the first step is going to be to get rid of those bolts. I'll probably have to saw them off. I don't see a way around that. They're too long, and I've trapped them in there because I never expected I'd be changing this engine. So I'm going to have to pull those bolts up as high as I can and zing them off with the cutting wheel. And then, of course, once I've pulled them up as high as they'll go, when I get them cut off, the heads will just slide out from under that because that's completely open underneath there. There's a gap here that's, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch, more than enough. Okay, well, I guess let's get them bolts out of there first, and we'll start there. Well, I guess the first thing you need to think about when you're fabricating an engine mount is what direction will the stress be. For instance, in a car engine, when you rev the engine, the crankshaft goes one way, but the engine goes the other. So one motor mount has to be much stronger than the other because that's the direction that it's going to get pulled in. But you also got to consider when you decelerate, if the engine pulls, how do I explain this? When you let off the gas, now the car is pushing the engine, so it's going to twist the engine the other way. So that means both motor mounts on the sides have to be very strong. And the motor's really not going to get a lot of forward and backward shove. Nothing's going to be shoving on the front. This is on a front-wheel drive car. On a rear-wheel drive car. On a front-wheel drive car, all bets are off because now you got the motor going forward and backward instead of side to side. But in any event, the engine is in in a rear-wheel drive vehicle at least, is not going to get shoved forward and backward. It's mostly torque from the engine twisting. In this case, it's similar. In this case, we have this chain drive here. And so that sprocket, let me turn this engine right side up. That sprocket, when it pushes, in this case a golf cart, when it pushes, what's going on here is this chain is going counterclockwise. So what's the engine going to do? It's going to try to rise up. That's the direction it's going to want to go. And as a consequence, you need to hold the engine down as much as you can. And when you decelerate, when you let off of it, it's going to shove the front of the engine down, because now this sprocket is going to be driven forward instead of pulling forward. And so it's going to shove the front of the engine down. So basically, the strength of this motor mount all needs to lie in line. And in this direction, from side to side, nothing's going to rock the motor. The weakest thing in the world about would hold that motor in place so long as it can support the weight of the motor, because there's not going to be any torque to the sides, only front and back. So what we have to do is try to find a way to make this motor mount more long than it is wide. It does not need to go left and right a lot. But then you got the next thing to think of. This motor, because it's made for not a golf cart, it has these pinholes. This is what you're provided to mount it with. Pinholes here and a pinhole here. That is it. The only thing left, whoop, kick the camera. Oh, the only thing left is these foot peg holes. Now, those are strong. I'm sure someone has at some point broken an engine by coming down on a foot peg, or by, for whatever, or jumping in their weight, their full weight, landing on a foot peg. But I've never seen it. These thread in there, those are heavy bosses, and they go in there. Oh, I had a bolt I had already measured it with, but it's about that far. That's close to an inch. It's over 3/4. That's quite a little bit, and that's a good heavy boss and a good strong place on the engine, and it's on both sides. So the initial thing I need to do, and with most motor mounts, it's like this when you're fabricating it, when you don't have something from the factory that's a better solution, is you got to come up with something to weld to. Now I've got a piece of metal here, and I've got a little piece of cardboard that I'm going to use for a template. What I need to do is transfer these holes over to this piece of cardboard. Now I can't stick out this way. I can't stick out on this side very much because I've got the chain sprocket here, and I don't know with what I would call 100% certainty if I'm going to get in the way of that chain. I'm going to try not to. I'm going to hope I don't. But sitting here looking at it, there's a possibility that chain's going to be coming more down than back, and there is clearance for the chain, but there ain't a lot. And if I start sticking stuff up here in the path of that chain, then I'm going to have to cut a groove in the thing that I stuck in the path of the chain. And yeah, it's going to go horribly wrong. I thought for a little bit that this bracket off of that old transmission would fit on this, but instead they're exactly the same size. But what I may do is run a strap from this to this, made out of good heavy, this is 3/16. This would be pretty good stuff for it. But some sort of strap with a couple holes in it. And since this can go up and down, that would allow me to adjust it a little bit. Because the second thing you got to think about with this type of motor anyway, something with a chain drive, is how are you going to adjust the chain? My drive shaft ain't going nowhere. It has to be fairly square with the mount of the motor, because you don't want this chain to be all cockeyed one way or the other. It has got to be in perfect alignment with that sprocket, and the back sprocket's going to be small just like the front sprocket. So what I'm going to have to do is transfer these holes over so that I know where to drill. Drill the holes in this little plate and get something I can weld to. Once I have something I can weld to, I can build from there. but I have to find a way to attach the metal that I'm going to weld all up into a mount to the engine, and this is the first step, getting something to weld to. And then once I've got something to weld to, then I can build off of it. Probably not going to be welding it while it's attached to the engine, because the melting point of this steel is higher than the melting point of this aluminum, and I don't want to find out the hard way that the Chinesium aluminum, this was a Chinesium alloy, is that what it was? Yeah, I don't want to find out it melts easy. So we're just going to go with doing most of the welding off of this. I may be able to tack it, but I can't just sit and lay a serious bead, because I will chew this poor thing. And I need to try and get this as square as I can with the engine. I don't want it to be cocked one way or the other. So let me get this transferred over. There's a few ways I could do that, but I'm thinking, since this is brown cardboard on this side, the first thing I'm going to try is using the weight of the motor to impress these holes. Well, these little, what would you call them, bosses, into this paper, which will give me a clue as to where the holes go. That may not work, and if it doesn't, then I'm going to paint this with a light layer of oil and pick it up and set it down on this gently, or just hold it here, put it where I want it, and then press it and transfer the oil over, and then the places with no oil is where the holes go. There's a few ways you can do that. I've heard of people putting paint on those and then quickly sticking this up there. I don't know that I want to paint all over my motor, but you could do that. Magic marker doesn't work. Years ago, I tried magic marker. Did not work out. Set that down. I need something solid. This 2x4 that has been well used is probably going to be that something solid. And I need... How do I want to do this? I think maybe I better put the cardboard where I want it and then try to keep it there. I don't know. This is a three-handed job. This is that's going to be a challenge. You know, I may just oil transfer it. I was going to use the weight, but I think oil transfer is going to be the way to go, because there's only one of me, and this is almost a couple-person job. So what I need is a little dab of oil. As fate would have it, I have some. Now I'm just going to take this oil, if I can get to some. There's a little. And I am going to gently put a small coat, just to the finest layer, on this. Just a little. Just enough to leave a greasy spot. This is kind of redneck, I'm afraid. This is probably not the approved method. I'm sure there's some way to make an imprint better than this. And this is what I thought of, and I've done it this way before and it worked. So it's one of those things where if it works, you might as well try it again. Now if I can get that lid to stay on there. This rag, clean my hand off a little. I don't want to be leaving oil on everything I touch. Okay, factory edge. Let me confirm that I've got this cut pretty straight both ways, but yeah, that's good and straight. That's good and straight. Okay. So what we're going to do is set this up here about where I'd like that piece of metal, which means just like that. There's our holes. Now we get the magic marker and we mark out those holes to be sure we don't lose them. I think I'm going to color them in. And I'm doing that because they're not the most even circles I've ever drawn in my life, even with a line to follow, if you can imagine that. But if I fill it up, it's closer than this one. Okay, 4 holes. Now I just need to get my drill press. I need to punch these holes out as best I can so that I know where I'm going to drill. And then I can use that to transcribe those onto this piece of metal. And then once I've done that, I can install the piece of metal and start looking for ways to build this up. I need to raise it based on what I saw out at the golf cart when I was setting this in and looking around. A little more than the thickness of this 2x4. It needs to actually be, this is 1.5 inches, and I would be very happy with 2 inches. Then I need to be able to slide it. Well, the piece of metal I cut this off of was a mount for a small engine. Got a couple of them. And I'm thinking I'm going to be able to recycle these slots and not have to try and drill or cut one. I'm just going to weld these on in the appropriate places and use those for, that's more than enough to adjust a chain. It only technically needs to be able to adjust one link. If it's loose in the middle and you go this way and it won't go, you go that way. And if for some reason you still can't get a match on the chain, then get it in a place where you can tighten it up. You throw a half link in and try again. But this will work. Between being able to remove links and being able to add a half a link, you can get this so close that it's not really going to matter. And it's going to be a very short chain. I would say it's going to be longer than this one was. This is the chain that was in the golf cart. Now that's a short chain. That's a bracelet. It'll probably be a little longer than that, but not a lot longer. Probably less than twice. Well, this is a big sprocket in the front, so it'll be close to twice. We'll see. All right, let me transcribe these over where I can drill this piece of sheet metal out. Once I get my piece of sheet metal drilled where I want it, we'll pick it up again. This drill press doesn't look it, but it has had a very easy life. All right, we're going to have grindy drill press noises here rattling and thumping along. So bear with me for a minute. Almost feels too fast. I'm going to slow that down a little bit. If I can change this belt out, that is. That belt is snug. Let me try mid-speed. See if, well, let me get this down. On the second pulley, right there. And then on the second pulley here. Should be right. There. See what that's like. That's a little better. Oh, that's much better. That's the perfect cutting speed right there. Don't think I can improve on that. Whoopsie, got a little stuck. I probably should be using lube on this. Of course, it wouldn't hurt if I went a little slower. I mean, I'm feeding it to work too fast. All right, well, these need redressed. They got burrs and stuff sticking up on them. I got just the thing for that. Let's see here. I feel like one of these. Let's see. Get this drill bit out of here. Rough. Okay. Now I'm going to have to move the table up a lot for this little short bit. Okay. Loosen that up. It's a little rusty, mostly from sitting around not being used. I gotta say, I don't use this drill press as much as I should. Have to put a wire brush in my drill one of these days, or my angle grinder, or not angle grinder, but die grinder. Buff some of this rust off. There. That is very smooth. That's what we were shooting for. All right, let's go back over to the mount and see if it sticks up there and fits. All right, I don't remember which way I put this. I think that's close. I wonder what would happen if I turned it over. I see this got this hump. The problem is that I've still got to grind, it would appear. It's not fitting exactly right. Wonder what I could have done wrong there. How did I line this up? Like this? Like this? No. Maybe? That can't be right. Huh. I'm dead square in the center of every hole. But I don't know that these holes are perfectly square. Okay, this is the way it was. All right, and I turned it over. And I think I punched them through just like that. That's close. 3 of them's right, 1 of them is somehow off. just a little bit. So it would go this way, which is how I originally had it. And I got 3 that are dead on. And let me get bolts. These bolts are too long, but they'll serve for what I'm doing. I'm just sticking this in here. I have more. Here's one. One of them super long ones. Can I get that in there? Too far off? Can I get this one in there? Yeah. So that one fits. Well, I gotta admit, that's a little kooky. So I'm going to have to re-drill that one just a little bit. These are bang on. That's exactly how it should be. So we get the... Where did I put the marker? Huh. All right, well, I'm going to mark that one and ream it out just a little bit on one side. Try and make it actually fit. So let me get the marker, measure, mark where I need to be, and polish that a bit. I'll be back. Well, it would appear that the time for welding has come upon us. I cut a couple of little pieces there for standoffs, kind of to stand it up. It's got to be a little higher than the thickness of a 2x4 to clear everything just the way I want. So I have cut 2 pieces. I've got one piece lined up. Once it's welded and cooled, then what I'm going to do is put the other piece on, but I have to kind of pick my spot. And so once this one's on and stuck, I can't really hold both of them up at the same time. So I got to have one welded on so I can pick my spot for the other piece. And anyway, we're going to go over there and get to frying some metal. That's not a good sign. I believe, although I can't be certain, that I just tripped the breaker. Ow! That's funny because, not as funny as it could be. I got a hunch. I think I tripped this one. Let's see. Yep. Yeah, I did. Well, I'm going to have to put that on the meaner breaker. It's okay, I've got a meaner breaker. Let me switch things around here. I'll be right back. Okay, I think I've got it sorted out. Let me get back down there and try again. Man, that irritates me. Cut that wire loose. Power on the welder. Let's start on the other side. I tell you, these little Harbor Freight welders, these little Harbor Freight flux core welders, if you get a good one, if you don't get the cheapest of the cheap, they're not bad. That thing seems to make better welds than I would have ever expected from a flux core. It's kind of hard to believe, honestly. Once I get this done here, I'll wire brush it and I'll show you. This one, where I've stopped and started a couple of times, is not going to be as pretty as it could be. But the other side there, it wasn't bad. All right. I'm going to start welding this side. Careful, that's hot. I won't mess up my cable. Okay. Tough to maintain my balance. Squatted down on my knees like that. Yeah. Kind of knew that was going to happen. Back up here. Sit on the ground with the spider slug. Kind of get splattered on my kneecap. There we go. Close enough. All right. Well, that's going to be too hot to handle for just a little bit. I don't think it's going to show up real good on camera until I get it wire brushed, but that's a pretty decent weld. I mean, yeah, it's a little splattery because it's flux core, but all in all, it ain't bad. That's got to cool. I'm going to set that down. Good penetration, too. There. That ain't too bad. This is the green one. This is the DC flux core welder, and it is infinitely superior to the other one. For a few bucks more, you get an awful lot better welder. We'll be back when that cools. I'll wire brush it and see what it looks like. Well, let me get some light. Try and get this where you can see better. That's what you can expect out of a flux core welder. If you get a decent one. That's not too bad. Now this side would look better if I weren't stopping and starting 18 times and tripping the breaker and things. But we got good penetration. And that's not a terrible bead for an amateur, considering, and it's a flux core welder. All right, let me clean this up just a little more and try and get rid of some of the splatter. That's still kind of warm. The splatter can't really be helped a lot. If you get closer to the work, yours only supposed to be a 1/4 of an inch, but I find that it burns up my tips a little too quick if I get too close. So I tend to give it about half an inch, which is still too much. With one that takes gas, with a MIG welder, your stick out is more like 3/4 of an inch. You can actually get pretty far away from the wire to the actual electrode on your gun. But this one, you're supposed to be right on it. And I tend to stay just a little too far away, and that causes most of that splatter. All right, I'll be back after I clean this up some more and get the other piece locked down ready to weld. All right, that's got the second piece lined up as square as I can get it. Let me get clamped up and grounded. I think we're going to put the ground on this side this time. Can I get that over that? Boy, that'd be nice. This way? There's got to be a way. It's so close. There it is. That's the one downfall of these Harbor Freight welders. The ground clamps are horrible. Absolutely horrible. Where's my helmet? Oh, I gotta take that off. Don't look too bad. Okay, let that cool and clean it up. I'll show you how I did that time. Okay, got the other one. Here is, if I can find a place to put it in the light, here is the next weld. Looks fair. That's not too bad. This one's a little jumpy, and you'll see a couple of little grinding marks there. That's where I had the flapper disc trying to get rid of some of these balls. I've decided if they're not anywhere a bolt goes, I'm going to leave them, because they're a little hard to get to. Nobody's ever going to see them, and they don't matter. There is quite a little bit of splatter there. A lot less this time because I remembered to get close. As you see, yeah, I mean, you can see where they used to be, even though I ground at them. Not near as much splatter here, since I was quarter, maybe 3/8 away, no more. Here I was up to a half and probably a little bit more a time or two, and that made much worse splatter. So that's kind of the secret with a flux core. Get pretty close. I mean, don't touch it with the guide tip, you know, but get close. Get that wire short. 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch is about how far you want to be. Alright, well, I went and got some bolts and made studs. Basically, I cut the heads off the bolts and then I dressed them up a little so they wouldn't be just obnoxious. I'm going to put those studs in the engine, provided I did my job right straightening them up. Might have to work on that one a little bit. See how this one goes. That one goes. If I could keep a hold of it, it'd go better. That one goes. I wonder what's wrong with this one. I'm getting my razor blade here. Check the edge for boogers. I'm not seeing any boogers really. Should be fine. I don't know why it didn't go the first time. Yeah, it's gonna go. And I'm leaving the factory ends out. They're just done better than I can do them. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to get some Loctite because I don't want them to come out. Now the reason I'm doing studs instead of bolts, because this is aluminum, it don't like a lot of threading in and out, and I may have this thing on and off that mount 10 times to get it just the way I want it. So I want something in here permanent that won't be boogering up the threads. I want the threads in this aluminum to be good forever, and there's no sense risking it. And I'm going to put just a little Loctite there and a little bit in the hole. I want to be sure. I'm just using blue just in case I ever want to take it off. Now the way we tighten that up, so we can go in by hand until it stops, get a couple of nuts, lock those nuts into each other. I hope one of these fits. Okay, that is not the right size wrench, but it'll work. Now we're just going to go ahead and wrench it in the rest of the way. We don't want to punch the back side of the hole out, but we want this pretty snug. And that appears to be the one. Well, it would be. Except I think I just saw the nut slip. What's that rolling around there? Sharpie. Back up there. Let me see if I can hold this well enough to tighten the nuts against each other better, so I can make sure that's tight enough. Okay, that one's in. Now I'm going to do that to the other 4, and when I get done here, we'll test fit that plate, see how that's going to work out. Alright, we got all the studs in. Now, I haven't tried this yet, but it should just slip right on. It should just slip right on. There we go. Okay, we're getting a little bound up. There. Okay, now we're good. And we can put the washers on and the nuts on. I'm just going to put the nuts for now. And the reason for that is I'm going to be taking it back off to do some welding. I don't want to weld with that motor on it, really. Although there's a chance that I might have to. But for right now, we're just going to put the nuts on. When I had to notch it out right here, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little notch here, because there's a raised rib on this motor. There's a bolt right here I made sure not to get in the way of. Honestly, I'm not sure what that bolt does. This is oil drain. This one at an angle, you know, not a clue. It almost looks like another drain, but it's not. It may go to the transmission. There's another hole here I don't know what that does either. It's not something I've ever had to take out, so hopefully it's something I never will have to take out. But I left it clear just in case I ever need to get in there. Come on. Oh, come on. There. I ain't really trying to wrench this down tight. I just want to get it in position. Wow, that's took more than I expected. Hope that's not hitting. I don't think it is, but that's kind of the purpose of this test fit, is to see if it is hitting anywhere. Okay. Don't want it super tight, but I do want to be sure I'm down all the way. Then if it's leaning on something I don't want it to, then I'll know. Okay. Now I look for air gaps. Good here, good there. Okay. Well, the goal next, I'm going to cut this plate off. Whoop, kick the camera. I'm going to cut this plate off, but it's going to go in here in such a way that I can reach in and get to the bolts. Then I'll drill 4 holes in that heavy metal plate in the golf cart, and that'll allow me some movement. Ideally, I won't need any. The chain is going to be short. It won't be as short as this one, but it's going to be short. But I don't know at what angle it will end up. It will not be where it's supposed to be, which is here. It's going to end up probably down some. There's no way around it. And there is clearance, and if I have to, I can take some of these bolt bosses down just a little bit, but I shouldn't need to. But anyway, that's what's going on next. I'm going to take this out. This is almost exactly the height it will be, and that will tell me if I need to make it even higher. For instance, if I have to make it higher so I can move it back more, then I can move these bolt holes back some too, or it'll be up in the air some, and it'll sit almost astraddle of the sprocket. Well, the drive shaft. I guess jack shaft, drive shaft, I don't know. It's kind of a combo. Anyway, let me take this out and set it in a spot and see what it looks like. Okay, I've got her set in there. It's not quite straight. I believe it needs to turn that way just a little bit, possibly even more. So I see a few things. It looks like it'll clear enough. You'd think that'd have to get completely out of the way of this frame, but that suspension only has so much travel. Let's see. The chain, if I put it right where I've got it now, the chain will clear enough. It'll actually work pretty good. This sprocket is coming off, and it's going to end up right over here in line with the sprocket. And it'll be a fairly short chain. I'd like to come back just a smidge more, but I can't, because one of the rails I got here, these little rails here, one of these is in the way. It's already touching the mounting plate, and I don't know that I can jockey it around much more than that. I need to put a different sprocket on it or move that sprocket one. That's a pretty good sprocket. And it's smaller than this one, and that sounds like a bad idea, but it's not. This rear end is about 14:1, and most of your sprockets are not on a dirt bike or whatever. Most of your sprockets are nowhere near that. They're what, 3 to 5:1, somewhere in there, depending. 5:1 would be unusual. That would be a really big back sprocket. This rear end's 14:1, so it is low geared. So I should have plenty of power, not a whole lot of speed, but that's okay. We don't want a lot of speed. This is the workhorse. Well, let me get set up here to move some stuff around. I'm going to leave that engine in here, but I'm going to scoot it over out of the way a little bit so I can work. I'm going to start getting that drive shaft sorted out with the new, either a new sprocket or that sprocket. I really like that sprocket, but it's small. I've got some that are bigger. Get it closer to 1-to-1. It won't be, but it'll be closer to 1-to-1. So I don't really want to overdrive that rear end too much. I don't think. Honestly, I don't know. Well, let me see how the chain fits on them. If the chain's kind of loose, that's going to make a difference. You know, these 420 sprockets, or so they call them, they're not all 420. Let me go find them sprockets and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so this sprocket is a pretty beefy one. But look at how the chain fits. It said it was a 420 sprocket, but really? That's some considerable amount of play. This sprocket here looks thinner than that one, but it's about the same. It's the center sprocket. It's the one I was hoping to use. Honestly, it's not as bad as it looks. That's how much gap you got right there. Okay, yeah, it's pretty big gap for a 420. And it says 420 right on it. 13 teeth 420. Huh. Of course, this is 40 chain. 40 is different. Let me look around and see if I've got some 420. Maybe that's the way we're going wrong. Maybe I need 420 chain. If you look at this chain and this sprocket, I think the problem is I misread. This is 40 chain. These are 420 sprockets. So while this 40 chain fits on the motorcycle engine great, it is a little loose on a 420 sprocket. I don't even know if I have any 420 chain, and I don't think, you know, sitting here rationalizing it with my brain power, I don't think I've got 420 chain, and I don't think 420 chain is going to fit that motorcycle. It's going to be too tight. It says it's 428. It fits 40 just fine. Yeah. Well, let me go check the sprocket that's on it. I kind of hate to use that one, being it's a lot smaller than the drive sprocket. But then again, 14-to-1 gear ratio. It's a little hard to get around that. Let me see how that fits on here. Well, it's a little loose too. It must be a 420 also. Well, what the fudge? As you put it on this engine, if you can get it on this engine, that's the sprocket wiggles, it's supposed to, but the actual play is minimal compared to this. Let's see if you can get there where you can see. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's like an eighth of an inch. That's an eighth of an inch. I believe that one's supposed to be 420. Or 40. Maybe it ain't. Well, that's a 3/4 shaft. So we know that. It's a 3/4 shaft. And we know I'm using 40 chain because that's what fits the motorcycle, right? That goes on there good. I think maybe I better go over to the store and find myself a different sprocket. All right, I'll be back. All right, I think I have the motor mount about the way it's going to go. I certainly hope so. I have to weld it in place, but I'm wondering if I shouldn't just kind of tack it a little bit and then lay out my holes and test everything first. It should be right. But you know, it's one of those things where when you're fabricating, sometimes it doesn't work out the way you thought it would. So close. I got to get this dead square as I possibly can. Is that half-inch mark? Yeah, okay, it's dead square as I possibly can. It doesn't look it, but it is. These holes are not perfect. You see the gap here is bigger than the gap here. And the whole thing looks racked just a little bit. Part of that is because there was stuff in the way on the motor. So I drilled the holes straight, but the part is crooked to avoid some of that. Well, I need to get my helmet and take this ball cap off. All right. Guess we'll weld. Helps turn it on first. Okay. Well, we're going to call that tacked. I'm going to call that tacked in place. I need to cut some extraneous metal off of this. These folded up ends need to come off. They're not only making it too long, getting in the way, but also the oil drain is going to be over here, and I'm not too sure I want that in the way of me getting to the plug. Okay, let me get my grinder set up, do a little cutting. All right, just a quick update. The rain's been holding me up, and I really got to get this video out. So I'm going to post what I've done so far, and then we'll move on to the next stuff. You won't see it, but after I stop this, I'll just pick it up again. But the plate is about as finished as it's going to get. And like I said before, it looked all cattywampus when I was welding it. But this is the factory edge aligned with these slots. And if you look, pretty well in line with the motor. There's a seam right here that I used to do that alignment as the center point. It should be pretty well straight, even though it appears to be crooked. It's crooked here, and it's crooked here because it kind of had to be, but then this was put on straight. I've got some bolts to come in from the bottom, a couple of which will have to be welded funny. So we're gonna get, we'll get those bolts in, get this motor put on, and then I got this contraption here. The fans came for it. This is an oil cooler made to fit on the engine. Now I've got the hoses and stuff for it, but my solution for this is 3 12-volt computer fans. They don't pull hardly any power, but they move quite a bit of air, and 3 of them ought to be enough to keep it cool. What isn't here, and I'm still waiting for, is, there's another part. It is a thing from Summit, I think. Summit sells it, but you'll see when it gets here. I'll show it to you. But basically, it's for old cars to put an electric fan in them, and then now where do I put the fan switch? Well, you can strap it to the radiator hose, of all things, or they said you could epoxy it to the head. There's a surface that needs to touch the head, and then you put epoxy on the side. You're not supposed to put anything on the surface of that sensor. Well, anyway, but you can press it against the head. So what I'm going to do, there's some bolts up here, and I'm going to run a strap on both sides from this bolt down probably to right here. A little strap between these two on both sides. A little extra support. But I think I'm going to be able to put that thing against the head right up here. And there's a little piece that sticks off a little, almost like a springy piece. And with enough spacer, meaning a long enough bolt, I should be able to press that against the head here somewhere, in this side or the other side. But I'm going to put a strap on both sides. There's a bolt just like that on the bottom too. But I'm going to attempt, and if I can't do it there, I can attach it to the strap itself with its own mounting solution. Maybe put it on this fin right here. But whatever, it's going to be the switch that turns on these fans. And this oil cooler should keep it pretty cool. But if it turns out that it doesn't, I'll get one of the larger fans, a 4-inch, a 6-inch, something like that, and mount it in front of the head, blowing over the engine just to keep air over it. It's not going to be enough fan to make it, sitting idle in a closed-up shed for a month, but it should let me, combined with what airflow it does get underneath, should be enough to keep it cool. But this oil cooler was meant to be the absolute will work solution, because and it also serves another function. It's not just going to be the oil cooler, but whatever oil is in those lines and in this radiator, that's just extra oil capacity, and that's a good thing. The more oil you've got in that engine, the cooler it will run, for starters, because it spreads that heat out over more oil. And second, more oil means it's not as abusive on it between oil changes. The more oil you got, the less fouled up it gets. If you could put a external tank on this thing and have, a couple gallons of oil, it'd be better for it. But you can't and you shouldn't. But you could. Oh, excuse me. I'm inhaling dust in here because I've been grinding and working. And well, anyway, that's the plan for the future. But for now, we're going to have to wrap this video up. It's getting lengthy. And also, it's been way too long since I posted because there's just been so many hang-ups. Anyway, I want to thank y'all for watching. If you like the video, please punch the like button and subscribe, because there's going to be a lot more crap like this coming your way. This is what I do. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Guys like you are what makes this stuff possible. And girls, if there's any watching, feel free to like and subscribe and come on back for more videos, because there will be more. And our next video, we should be putting the wiring harness in. Of course, the motor hopefully will be getting bolted in. Trying to find a location for this. It has to be below the engine. If I put it above the engine, the oil in it would drain back in the crankcase. And for there to be enough oil in this, there would be too much oil in the engine. So what we've got to do is put this low so that it always has oil in it. That oil just doesn't get changed. Of course, the next time you start it, the new oil comes in, rinses it out, and it's a little diluted. I could even rig it where I could take it out and dump the oil out of it. I'll think of something. There's just no good way to drain it. Maybe if I mount it the other way around, I could disconnect the hose every time, but eventually you'd wear out the hose. So, well, we'll just think on that. Anyway, we're wrapping this one up for today. So thanks for watching, guys. Please come back and watch the next one.